Welcome to Oilers Live Podcast. We're on episode 26, and I'm excited to have as my guest Ryan Robinson, who runs the YouTube channel Blogman Rye, and you can also find him on Twitter at Blogman Rye. Thanks for joining me, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
So lots happening in the Oiler world, and we'll get to that. But one of the things and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here is I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel. I've watched, I can't say I've watched them all, but I've watched a number of your episodes. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe even how you got started.
Well, the original video that I made was back in December of 2014, and it was Life as an Oilers Fan. And so how that came about was I actually explained a little bit of it in the video, but for those of you listening who haven't seen it, I've been an Oilers fan since I was 11 years old. So I started watching them in the 96-97 season, and I was immediately a diehard fan. And so I'd followed them for those, I guess that would be 16, almost 17 years. And I was at a point with the Oilers where I was almost completely disengaged from the team. I don't know how you were handling things then when it was sort of at the darkest of times, but I actually remember there was one night I forgot they were even playing. And all the people that I had sort of chatted with the Oilers about, just like we're doing now, those relationships had dwindled because, it had gone from frustration and anger to indifference. Yeah. And so I was finally at the end of my rope, and I was like, you know what? I just need to, I guess, spill my guts here and tell everyone how I feel and then leave it at that. And so I work in the audio-visual field, and so I thought the best medium to get my message across was to make a video. I've told you before, I hate writing, and it's such a struggle for me. So I thought I just made some notes, and then I turned the camera on, and away I went. And so that video, I think a lot of people felt similarly to me. And so when that came out, I think it shot up to something like 65 or 70,000 views in just a couple days. And so I kind of left it at that. And then I had mixed feelings about the Oilers from then until when they won the draft lottery. And then when that happened and they finally decided to bring in some new people, I thought I would make a couple more videos sharing my thoughts, and they were well received. And so then I set a goal for myself for the 2015-16 season to do one video a week. And it's just sort of gone from there.
So, if I look back, you've obviously, you've got kind of a sort of a launching point of when you wanted to do Oilers blogging on YouTube. You had some, it looks like prior to that point in time. What's your most popular video that you've done?
You mean just Oilers content? Because I do have other stuff
just
on
Oilers content.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, obviously the Life as an Oilers fan. Second to that is Life as a post-draft lottery Oilers fan. And then I think other than that, maybe the one I did about Milan Lucic when they signed him. I can tell you my favorite blog that I've done is Analytics versus Culture. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is I do a Peter Chiarelli impersonation in that video.
Yeah, I saw it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, so that's probably my favorite. But they usually, the videos, I think I kind of have a following of about somewhere between 1,200 and 1,600 people that regularly watch them. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy doing it. And unfortunately, this past year, due to a lot of different circumstances, I didn't have the time to do it as often. Yeah, but I'd like to. I'd certainly like to. But I have a young family. I think you know what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's difficult to find the time.
So, curious because it's obvious that your family's quite involved in this as well, and great to see you get the support behind that. And as I can attest, that you need that kind of support in order to make these things work.
Mhm.
How long goes into making one of your videos, roughly, from start to finish?
Well, usually I try to make them between 4 and 5 minutes. I don't think people have much more of an attention span than that. And that's generally if I'm doing them week to week. But this year, that got a little bit out of hand because I didn't do some for a long time and then the videos were longer. And so a lot more work went into it. But typically, it's about, I would say, for every 1 minute, probably an hour of work. So if I do a 5 minute video, that's about 5 hours of work for me.
Wow. Wow, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
That's,
And it's, sorry, and it is difficult. Like, and you know this because, you're kind of in the Oilers Twitter verse. Stuff comes out so quickly that sometimes I feel by the time I can actually get something out, everything's been said about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it feels like, if you're not doing it right at that moment, then you've missed your opportunity to be relevant, for sure. Although, I'd say you've done a good job, and I think you probably pick your topics based on that knowledge that things are going to change. But a tremendous amount of respect. I figured that. Doing a video took a considerable amount of time. I can tell you that I've become quite good at the editing part of this podcast, and from start to finish, I probably tack on about 45 minutes at the end of a podcast, and that's how long it takes me to until I get it published and online and everywhere it needs to be. So certainly not the same time commitment. Which may allow me to do a couple episodes a week if necessary, but an hour a minute, that would be certainly debilitating for a hour and a half long podcast if it ever goes that way.
No, yeah, it's a process, but everybody does something different. You do the audio, I do the video. There's a lot of people out there writing, and as I said, I have a lot of respect for people who write because I don't have the patience for it. I think so much more quickly than I can jot down. I often find I actually record my thoughts and then just take notes from that. So, yeah, everybody does it differently, but if you can get your message across, I guess that's all that matters.
Yeah, and you've done a good job. I think recently you did the Coach's Corner blog, and you had your young daughter on there who did a fantastic job. By the way, she probably enjoyed that a fair bit, I would imagine.
She did. I asked her because one of the things I try to do in my videos is make it personal. So, because there's so many people covering the Oilers that you try to be unique, right? Have a unique take. And so I try to involve my family in it as much as I can. And so I just asked her, I was like, do you want to do a video with Daddy? And she just blushed and kind of put her head down to the side. And she was like, yeah. And so then even she had really no idea what she was discussing. I gave her the lines, obviously.
Yeah. But, she did a wonderful job.
Yeah. But she had full creative control when it came to the props, as you probably noticed. There was a lot of choice. But yeah, no, she did a really good job. And even though she was nervous and stuff, but I thought it came off pretty well. So
yeah. No, it was fantastic. And I think your wife's been involved in a couple of episodes as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah. She loves it. She loves it. Yeah. And people I think like her more than they like me, because when I make those videos that she's in, I get way more feedback and way more views. So it's funny how that works, but
well, she probably rubs it in, no doubt. I'm sure.
Yes, she does.
Well, that's great. No, it's and you're doing a fantastic job. And I think what just from a production value, I mean, it's been fun watching your videos. But what actually made me reach out to you was one of my regular guests, Kelly from Beer League Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
he watched Coach's Corner, and I hadn't watched it yet, and he was actually raving to me about the particular episode and some of your thoughts on what was wrong with the coaching and how it went about. And so, you've been a fan since you were 11 years old. What have you played the game? Are do you just come by your analysis by having been a fan for so long? What do you owe to that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm no expert by any means. I'm a Canadian hockey fan.
Yeah.
So my background playing hockey, we lived in Ontario, and I played when I was 6 years old. And then we moved to Alberta, and my dad kind of asked me what I wanted to do because we didn't have a lot of money. And so I chose baseball. And so I played that for a few years instead of hockey. And then I started playing again when I was 11. And then unfortunately, I had a really serious back injury when I was 13, so I had to quit playing. But I'm not that skilled at hockey, but the one thing that I always have had is just natural hockey sense. I have an understanding, I think, for how the game is played. And so I find myself, as I've gotten older, thinking more and more like a coach. And so that last video that I did felt very natural for me because I find I come at the game from that angle. Is I'm always looking at players that are being deployed and the strategy that the team's using, and I think the game much more like that. And I hope my son plays hockey because I'd love to coach him when he's old enough. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience playing the game, just a few years, but I've been watching it, since I was 10 or 11 years old. So
what was it in, you said about 96, you said you started watching?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you remember this, but the games used to be on CBC on Saturday night, and CBC, it wasn't just on cable. You could pick it up if you had rabbit ears, an antenna, depending on where you were, of course. And so I just remember we didn't have cable. One Saturday night, my dad, he got out this antenna and he put it on the TV and started fiddling around with it. And then on came the hockey game. And this was late in 96, I think it would have been for the playoffs. And so I just kind of started watching with him. And the Oilers missed the playoffs that year, so they weren't involved. But then in the fall of 1996, I started following really closely. I would go to the local confectionery and pick up the sports ticker because they didn't always have the games in the newspaper, some of the late games.
Yeah.
And so I would pick up the ticker and I would have all the scores from the night before, and I'd come home and I would actually manually update my own standings. So I was keeping track of the standings on my own. And so actually I really enjoy statistics, but I didn't get to see the Oilers play a lot that first year until the playoffs, because then all the games were on TV. This was back when they maybe had 15 or 20 games televised in a season. Yeah. So that's sort of how that happened. But then I really fell in love with the Oilers in the playoffs, because then obviously I was putting a face to a lot of these names, right, that I'd been following all year.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you watched back then, but that was a very fairy tale-esque playoff series against Dallas that year with Cujo and Todd Marchant. So yeah, that's how I really, really fell into it.
So if I'm not mistaken, that was the one where they were 2.5 minutes roughly left and they were down by 3. Came back. That was the series against Dallas, right?
That's right.
And
game 3.
Yeah, and Marchant came back and scored. So I'm probably about give or take a year or so, 10 years older than you. Mm-hmm. And I was a big fan. I've been a big fan since. I grew up in Edmonton, so the glory years. I was young, but it was hard not to be a fan. We actually, in those times, when the Stanley Cup was happening, there was always events going around in class and around the city. And in fact, we made banners one year as I can't remember if it was grade 3 or grade 4, but we made banners for the Stanley Cup parade, and so it was pretty exciting times, and hard not to be an Oilers fan. Mm-hmm. But I do remember 96, and I've got an interesting story to tell about. I was just telling somebody about this story the other day. When the Oilers were down by 3, I think, in that game, mm-hmm. I had a couple friends that were at the game, and they left to beat the traffic.
Yeah.
And we were there were a number of us living on campus at the university at the time, and we were all watching the game and saw, the epic comeback, and literally huddled probably 12 of us around the TV when our 2 friends who were at the game showed up to ask, "What are you guys watching?"
Oh my goodness.
And that is why, and especially in the playoff game, I would never leave early.
Yeah,
for that very reason. But I've always subscribed to the thought that you stay to the end anyway. But that game, and I could see why that would make you an Oilers fan. Those were exciting times, and some fun hockey. And Cujo was quite the goalie. I long for those times.
Yeah, no, he was unreal. And just everything about that series was just, they were the underdog, and Dallas they were a punching bag for them all season. They finished like 30 points behind them in the standings, and no one gave them a chance, like no one. And just everything that went on in that series, there was a lot of emotional highs and lows. And it was incredible that they won that series. That was the only time they ever did beat Dallas.
Yep.
But yeah, once that happened, I've never been able to shake that. Like, I'll be an Oilers fan till the day I die.
And was your dad an Oilers fan or a Leafs fan? Maybe coming from Ontario?
Nope, he is a Boston Bruins fan.
Oh, a Bruins fan.
Yeah, he's a Bruins fan. So he, I'm sure when I was really small, like I did like the Oilers when I was like 3, 4, or 5 years old, because we were in Alberta and then we moved to Ontario for him to go to school.
Yeah.
But the Oilers beat the Bruins. Actually, I think it was 30 years ago today in the final.
I was at 2 of those finals games.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That would have been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a Bruins fan. So he never pushed me to cheer for them. But I do cheer for them now. Like when the Oilers are out, I pull for Boston. But I came about it on my own, and I'll do the same for my kids. Like, they have the Oilers gear, but my daughter really likes Crosby. So if she wants a Penguins jersey when she's a little bit older, that's totally fine. And then my son, he's pretty easygoing. His favorite player is McDavid because he got a little figurine for his birthday last year.
Oh, nice.
But I won't pressure him. Whoever he wants to cheer for is totally fine.
Yeah, I think. I think that's the way to do it, right? And you just grow up sort of liking a team, and we all have our different reasons. I was actually, I was a huge Lemieux fan, more so than a Gretzky fan growing up, I actually really became a true Oilers fan probably roughly the same time as you. I was always kind of a bit of a fence sitter, but I was a big Lemieux fan back when he was playing, and just enjoyed watching him play. So very, but I guess things change, and it's funny that here we are, right? We've been through some really lean years, and we had had 1 year, of light, and hopefully we're back there.
Yeah, I know. Last season, it's hard to believe it actually happened. I mean, just the one that just happened.
Yep. Yeah.
17-18, because I don't think anybody saw that coming.
No, we really didn't. And you know what? That's a good segue for a break. Let's go for a quick break, and then when we come back, let's talk some Oilers hockey.
Oilers Live Podcast.
And welcome back to Oilers Live Hockey. I've got Ryan from Blogman Rye on YouTube, or you can find him on Twitter at Blogman Rye. We're back for part 2, and we're going to chat a little bit of Oilers hockey. Of course, as everybody knows, the Oilers have made some significant moves on the coaching front in the off season. I'd like to get your take. If those listeners that haven't seen it yet, they should go onto YouTube and watch Coach's Corner, is what Ryan labeled it, and it's his take of really, I'd say, the last season coaching review would be maybe a good way to put it. What's your thoughts on the Oilers' moves that they've made so far?
I think that they made some very astute moves here, and I think the proof is in that it seems these are universally praised moves. A lot of the time, I think as Oilers fans, we can convince ourselves that something's a good move, but when you hear other people praising it, that goes a long way. So what I really like about the moves is that Peter Chiarelli has an awareness of what went wrong last year with the coaching staff. So obviously the power play was horrendous, and the penalty killing was equally awful for about 2/3 of the season. So he knew those needed to be addressed. As well, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think the Oilers had the lowest production from their blue line last season. If not, they would have been in the bottom 5 for sure.
Yeah.
So he knew those were the needs once he had removed all of the assistant coaches. And so I feel he has addressed all of those needs very well. Bringing in Trent Yawney from the Ducks, there's a laundry list of defensemen that he has worked with in Chicago and Anaheim that have had great success in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce Swift Current's old coach, Manny. How do you say his last name?
So I've heard everyone pronounce it about 3 different ways. In fact, Stauffer on Oilers Now on Friday, he pronounced it in one sentence. He pronounced it Viveiros, and it's spelled Viveiros. But I've most commonly heard it Viveiros. So whichever way you go, we'll know who you're talking about.
Well, Viveiros. From what I read, the Swift Current power play the last 2 years operated at a blistering percentage, and apparently there was a lot of movement on it, a lot of creativity, and so that obviously was lacking from the Oilers last season. And then who's the third coach that they brought in?
Yanni, Gulutzan, and Viveiros.
Of course.
So Gulutzan, yeah.
How could I forget? So now the thing about Gulutzan is I think that he took the fall for Treliving and the injuries that Calgary had last year. Last summer, when Calgary traded for Mike Smith, I immediately said, this is a bad move. Not because he's a bad goalie. He's actually quite a good goalie, but because he's getting older and he's been hurt 3 years in a row now. And so I think a lot of people could have predicted that he would get hurt this year. And unfortunately for Calgary, he got hurt right at the wrong time. And so then he came back and was not himself, and the team just went off the tracks. And so I think Treliving felt he had to make some sort of move. He had gambled with Smith and bringing in Hamonic, and both moves sort of blew up in his face. And so I think Gulutzan had to fall on his sword there. And I've heard good and bad from Flames fans about him, but when he went out to Humboldt there with McClellan at the end of the year, that went a long way for me.
Yeah.
Just seeing him, his priorities are in order. He knows what it's all about, and hockey is secondary to that. And so, yeah, I was really pleased with that. He gained a lot of respect from me. And like I said, I think yeah, the circumstances were a little bit out of his control in Calgary. And the fact that he has a good working relationship with Todd already, I think helps. So I think he'll be a good addition. But like I said, just hearing from other people that these are positive moves, that really goes a long way in, reassuring me, and I'm sure the whole fan base, that these are good moves.
So, I mean, if we go back and we watch your video recently, I mean, you obviously, there were some things and some challenges that you saw with, how McClellan was running things. Do you think, do you think any of those problems are going to be still there just because we have different assistants, or do you think that, these are the right guys to make that change?
I think these guys will make a really big difference. The one thing that I really struggled with last year, and a lot of Oilers fans have experienced this, there's having a hard time, and then there's doing things so completely wrong that even people who don't really follow hockey know you're not doing it right. So, for example, the penalty killing. When you have your four guys standing in a straight line or a diamond at the top of the slot, it doesn't look right. And the numbers also suggest it's not very effective. So, I mean...
So there's a name for that style, by the way. It's called the check press.
The check press.
Yeah, and I will thank Kelly from Beer League Heroes on that one. He researched the different styles and checked it out. But yeah, it's called the check press. So anyway, sorry to change your...
That's totally fine. As long as they're not using the check press anymore, that's great. So even right there, and I kind of feel bad for McClellan, because from what I've heard, about 2/3 of the way through the year, he sort of took on the penalty killing duties as well as his head coaching duties. So I think he had a lot on his plate, along with the team struggling. I'm sure that weighed on him heavily. And then the power play, power plays are so simple. And when you have a player of McDavid's caliber to finish last and have the scoring leader on your team, it just doesn't add up. And I recognize this right away. Like, sometimes you see things sort of coming down the pike, and I think it was in late October or early November, I was watching them, and I'm like, teams know what they're going to do before they do it. They've scouted them. They know their set plays, and they just sort of cheat slightly towards defending those set plays. And then the Oilers just would pass the puck around because the plays weren't there. And another thing that hurt them is they had Clefbaum on the point, and I mean, he couldn't shoot all year. I felt bad for the guy. They kept putting him out there. And so the fallback play is, well, okay, we'll just throw it to the point man and he'll put it on net with traffic in front. But he couldn't do that. He'd either shoot it 5 feet wide of the net or fan on it or whatever. It wasn't working. And so the power play, I mean, like I said, I struggle to understand how it could be so bad with the leading scorer on it. And so so starting there, I think having anyone else doing the power play and penalty kill would be an upgrade. The fact that they brought in some people who have had long-term success with this, I think will help them that much more. So yeah, I think these are great moves. I mean, time will tell. We don't know how it's going to play out, but I think the Oilers did their due diligence here and addressed the needs that the coaching staff was lacking. And like I said, I felt bad for Todd last year. I mean, I know he was on a diet, but I'm sure he lost some weight from stress last season, because he looked like he lost like 30 pounds last season. So I know he probably feels a little better that it's going to be a bit more collaborative. And I think these are all Saskatchewan guys. So there's probably some camaraderie there already.
Well, so Viveros is actually a St. Albert boy, but the other three are, yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think there's some potential for some chemistry there, and we'll see how it pans out, but it looks good right now.
Yeah, so here's my thought on it, because I think I probably shared similar sentiments to you and around, the problems with the team last year, the coaching, the pre-scouting, same kind of concerns on, having McDavid on the power play and just not getting any results. You hear in this, I don't want to go down this topic, but I mean, you hear more and more everybody in the league saying this is now the best hockey player in the world. And so, to have that guy on the power play and not be successful, to have him on the penalty kill, even for that matter, and not be successful, these are certainly problems. I, at the end of the year, would not have given McClellan his job back. I was very, very down on it. I thought, I'm not in the anti-Chiarelli camp. It seems somebody made a good a post on Twitter and said, there seems to be, the anti-Chiarelli camp, the Taylor Hall fans, there's a whole bunch of different sort of factions of Oiler fans out there, and I should do a whole episode on finding out, who you identify with as an Oiler fan. When Chiarelli didn't let go of McClellan immediately, that was one of my first, besides the Reinhart trade, that was one of my first really disappointing moments with him. And because there's so many things I could justify with all of the other things that people didn't like with Chiarelli, and then this one moment I thought, why are we keeping him? And then what's funny is somebody made some again on Twitter, somebody talked about the Oilers getting Gulutzin as an assistant coach or even potentially a head coach. And I'll say it here, I laughed at it. I thought that's a joke, and I might have even said commented to the negative about it, thinking there's no way at all that would ever happen. And then, it really sort of got some legs behind it, and that Gulutzin was going to be an assistant and Yanni was going to be an assistant. And this was before Vivrios, was even in the picture. And, I'll be honest, I like it. I liked it from the moment I heard the rumors. I was pretty excited about it. Part of me, the only reason I wasn't, irate, which, I don't ever get irate. So maybe that's not the right word for it. But the only reason I wasn't really upset about McClellan not being fired was that there was a small part of me that thought we need some consistency behind the bench. And, I love it. I'm happy now. We actually, now we've got that consistency with McClellan, and we've got, two guys that have been head coaches before. Gulutzin had one successful year and one year where, really the Flames fell apart at the end of the season. And, some of that was Mike Smith. Some of that actually was, I don't think that team realized how important Tkachuk was to the team.
Totally.
Yeah. And so, I can't blame a guy for that. I mean, he, in my mind, and this won't be, if I have any Flames fans that listen, which I very much doubt, but in my mind, Gulutzin got more out of that team than there is talent. And, that may or may not be popular opinion, but I don't think the Flames are, even remotely close to being in the same league as the Oilers. I think they are not a playoff team. And for them to have been in meaningful games as late as they were, I got to think that was Gulutzin partially. And you're right. I think the one thing, that you said, not the one thing, but one of the things you said that I agree with, is that I think Trey Living is, trying to, justify some of the moves that he's made. I totally agree with you on Smith. The guy's never played as many games as the Flames needed him to play.
Yeah.
And he's aging. So, I'm not sure why you would expect anything other than that. This probably appreciate you being on the show, Ryan. That's probably more that I talk. Usually I let my guests do more of the analysis than myself. But this is, to me, this has been a real sort of positive step forward for the Oilers.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thought, while we're on this coaching thing? I mean, because there was a huge concern, I think, among Oilers fans that we would see Paul Coffey behind the bench. Are you? Does it matter to you? Are you happy about it, or what's your thought on this sort of thought around the old boys club? And this is obviously not an old boys club type of move. Mm-hmm. Does it matter to you as an Oilers fan?
Okay, well, let me back up for just a second.
Sure.
First of all, I'm happy to hear your thoughts. I'm not on here just to hear the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, no,
so,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I love talking Oilers with people.
Yeah.
And then, so I had made a video, I think probably about 2 months ago. Mark Spector wrote an article about this, what we would call the Red Wine Summit. So the old boys club with Gretzky and, getting together after the games and having a drink together and chatting. So the major issue that I had with the Oilers when they were at the very lowest is just the total lack of accountability. And when you have a group of guys like that who are just sort of hanging around or actually employed and they're buddies with the owner, there is no accountability. And if they're actually influencing things, that's really dangerous. Because I know these guys were great players back in the day, but if you look at a lot of their track record as coaches and managers and scouts, it's not very good. And so the one thing I will give Bob Nicholson credit for is I think there's some self-awareness in the organization now that they are laughed at league-wide, this old boys club. Mm-hmm. And even Oilers fans, will poke fun at them. I know this is our team, but we have no problem taking shots at them. And I think Bob Nicholson, there's an awareness there that he shouldn't have these guys making decisions. And optics are important too. It shouldn't even look like they have say in the decisions. So I think that maybe what happened there is the season wasn't going well, and Gretzky and the boys have an opinion, as they should. They've seen a lot of hockey, played a lot of hockey, and they said, hey, how about we bring in another set of eyes? I think actually somebody said that when they hired Coffey. So yeah, bring in Coffey, and that's fine. He's one of the best defensemen ever to play. If you want someone working with young D, that's great. But by no means should he be a head coach. He does not have the experience to take on that role. And so I think Nicholson saw the backlash to this happening and said, no, we need to let Peter and Todd do their jobs and take care of the hockey stuff. And I think that is what's happened. And so, honestly, I don't have a problem with Coffey down on the farm working with some of those young D there. I think that's great.
Yep.
But to have that accountability, and this goes back to what you said before about, wanting to fire Todd, and then you're kind of thinking, well, maybe we do need some continuity. If they had fired McClellan this year, you let the players off the hook. And I really don't think this of all seasons you can do this, because look what Vegas did.
Yeah.
How on earth can you give the players a free pass when a bunch of cast-offs, in my opinion, are going to win the Stanley Cup in like 10 days? So I think, they did need to keep Todd. I don't think you can say, okay, we fired all these other coaches, so we have to keep this guy. Other people made mistakes. That doesn't mean we should keep making mistakes. I think it was more, you know what? He had a bad year, but he is a good coach, and we need to keep some accountability in place here. So we are going to remove some people who did a really bad job. Johnson and Woodcroft. I know they pushed him down, but He's not coaching that power play anymore. So, yeah, I think Nicholson's aware of this, and he's allowed Chiarelli and McClellan to be making the hockey decisions, and I think it shows. They made good hires here with their assistant coaches, and the old boys club, it's fine if they are just enjoying a bottle of wine with Cates after the game, as long as he is not actively letting them participate in decisions when it comes to the organization. Because that's the impression I had when they brought Gretzky in. I thought he was an ambassador, like sell the game, to sell the Oilers and McDavid to the hockey community, So when I kind of got wind of him, sharing his opinions and what they should do, I was like, holy smokes, what are we doing here, people? Like, did you learn nothing from the last 10 years? Seriously. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is, it's actually a bit welcoming that we seem to have taken a different step. And, the whole Chiarelli, hire, I think, was them saying we need to, start to pull the Band-Aid off. And they didn't do it all at once, obvious, right? I mean, they, but I think there was some hope last year with that, season opening ceremony where they let McDavid take the puck. There was certainly some hope. I got chills actually watching that. And, it did feel like this was a new era for the Oilers, and we certainly had a new era last year. Okay, so now we've got this new coaching staff. We've got McDavid is coming back, obviously. What's your thoughts on the season ahead? I mean, do we you feel like there's doom and gloom ahead, or is last year a bit of an enigma? Is it primarily injury related? Is it the squad coaching? What's your thoughts on what lies ahead for next year? Do you think there's something that can be done to get us back to the playoffs?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I don't think they will ever, as long as McDavid's on the team, have another season like they had last year, because there was a lot of really bizarre statistics, like letting in the first shot. I think it was 13, 14, or 15 times. I mean, that's incredible. And losing all the coaches' challenges for the first 3 quarters of the season. And then obviously the power play and penalty killing, terrible numbers there. There was a lot of extremes. And I've said this to a lot of people. I think that in 2016-17, when they made the playoffs, a lot of things went right. Last season, everything went wrong. And so I can't imagine that happening again. And so I think right there, just playing, I think if they had played last season 100 times, they finished with less than 80 points, maybe 10 of those. So right there, I would say, yeah, they'll be better, even if they didn't do anything to the roster. So I guess that would get them into the playoff conversation. As far as the changes they've made, I said this at the beginning of the season last year in my season preview. You can write it up as best as you can and have the best team on paper, and the outlook can be great. And then you start playing the games and it doesn't go the way you wanted it to. That's why they play the games. So, I mean, it's anybody's guess. I can't imagine that they miss the playoffs again next year. I think everybody in the organization is going to feel a lot of pressure and responsibility, a good kind of pressure to get them back into the playoffs. I don't think people talk enough about how good of a season McDavid had last year. I mean, to do what he did when he was sick for 3 weeks, almost a month, and then with basically no support on the power play, no gravy points there. I mean, he had an incredible season. And other than Draisaitl, he was just playing with whoever on the wing for most of the year. I mean, he was absolutely incredible. And I think he's even going to be hungrier next year. I imagine he's probably going to be the first player since Crosby did at 120 points.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it can't be as bad as it was last year. I will say I believe they'll get back into the playoffs. I mean, anything can happen. We saw that this year with the Golden Knights. So, yeah, I think they need to come back hungry. I think one encouraging thing is there was a lot of redemption stories this season. Guys like Kopitar and Hall and McKinnon and now even Ovechkin in the playoffs. So that gives me hope that, guys can bounce back quickly and get back on track.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. The only thing that I'm uncertain about is that whole old boys club thing. Like the last thing I want to see is the season starts poorly. They stumble out of the gate and then, everybody's talking and it's like, well, we got to do something. And you fire Chiarelli and you make Wayne Gretzky the GM. Like that is like my worst nightmare. I don't even know what I would do with myself if that happened. Because I mean, the thing is if that actually did happen, you would have Wayne as GM and his brother as the assistant GM. So
yeah.
You'd have nepotism and this country club atmosphere like that would be just bad news. So I hope they do well. I know some fans are like the ones that really dislike Chiarelli and McClellan. They're like, well, I want to see the team fail now so that they fire these guys now and get it sorted out before too much damage is done. But I think the alternative is much worse. So I hope these guys have nothing but success this upcoming season.
Yeah. So, I like your, there's a couple things you said there that I really like. One is that, that whole thing about redemption and those, Kopitar is probably the biggest story. In my mind, Taylor Hall, I mean, I suspect most of us knew he had it in him. And, his ability to have a great season to me means nothing at all to the Oilers, right? He doesn't play for us, so I don't care anymore, right? I care as a hockey fan, but I don't go back to that and say, oh, why, right? So anyway, but that may or may not be a redemption season, but OV, that's that's definitely a big deal. Him getting to the finals, he's, in my mind, he's a likable guy, and I'm happy for him. I'll be cheering for the Capitals. I know you said you figure Vegas is going to win. I'm not certainly going to rule them out because I'm probably one of those that every quarter of the year I said now's when they fall off and kept expecting it, and I thought first round they'd be out. I thought second round they'd be out. I was sure that Winnipeg would beat them, and here we are. So I guess they seem to be the easy money now. And maybe when everybody finally believes in them is when they'll tank. Who knows? I'm not even going to say next year they'll come back down to earth because that team just plays so darn hard. Anyway, I'm kind of off the Oilers topic, but yeah, I really love that idea of redemption. And one of the things I thought with this year that as a parent and I know as a parent is that parenting is exhausting. And it brings a lot to the table that if you're a new parent, it was never there before. And Talbot had what I would say was a terrible year. Whether it's those first goals or whatever, but part of me wonders how much of having a new set of twins at home really means to this guy's life. I don't know if you listen to the 31 Thoughts podcast, but Merrick had spoken about a player that was drafted in the first round, whose career was ended by video game addiction.
I heard that.
Yeah, you heard that. And so, I think about that and I think, okay, well, Talbot, he might not have that, that same, it might not be the same thing, but the result of video game addiction is fatigue, right? And that's what they're worried about. And having a new set of twins, the result of that, no doubt, is fatigue. And as much as we'd love to think that Talbot's wife was, going to make sure that he never had to wake up in the middle of the night or whatever, I guarantee you they got a relationship just like everybody else does. And there were moments where she wasn't going to change diapers at 2 a.m, and he better damn well get out of bed, right? Right? And I don't effing care if it's a game night. Might have been said once or twice. Who knows, right? And so I don't know. I think that plays into it. Draisaitl, he had post concussion syndrome, or was playing with some concussion effects for part of the year. McDavid with the flu. Sekera, who would have thought as a team we needed Sekera as much as we did, and then to expect him back and playing at 100%. Well, that's just foolish, right? As a fan, to think that a guy can come back after that type of layaway. I play a ton of hockey, and I can tell you I take a week off and I go back and I have trouble keeping up. So there were a lot of factors. I really like the idea that you said around, all those bizarre statistics and how those played into it. Now, I don't want to give anybody, the break. These guys are professionals. They get paid, a ton of money to perform and do well. But, there were certainly a lot of factors that played into it. I have a certain element of hope that this team can get back to the playoffs. And the one thing that I continue to go back on is that at the beginning of last season, all of the quote unquote experts, they all had the Oilers right in the Stanley Cup Finals. So, you can rag on Chiarelli all you want, but everybody thought he did a good job up until the season started. Well, I shouldn't say they thought he did a good job, but they thought he had the team, right? So it didn't pan out, but I think there were definitely a lot of factors. So I do. If I was to make an early prediction, I think that you're probably right about one thing, is that McDavid's not going to let this happen again. This guy's he's just too good, right? And he's so fun to watch. I've never enjoyed watching hockey like a losing season so much. Right. I mean, we still had stuff to cheer about going into the end of the year, even though, we knew we weren't going into the playoffs again. What do you think, short of missing the playoffs this year, what would really sort of, change things for you? Is there anything that, you'd absolutely, or is it just playoffs, or, what's kind of the one thing that you're most scared of?
Well, like I said before, Gretzky becoming the general manager, I think what worries me most is the team. And I've talked about this before, and I know it's a hot button topic, is the culture of the team. And it's because it's not just culture of hockey. It's just culture in general. It's your working environment. My concern is that they don't keep up high standards of we work hard and we go to bat for each other. And the danger in not having a good culture is you have a player like Connor McDavid, and he is a very proud hockey player, and he wants to be successful. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. And if you don't show that you're serious about winning a Stanley Cup and being professional, I mean, how long is he going to stick around if you go back in the sewer and your organization is a mess? I mean, I imagine that's every Oilers fan's biggest fear, is that he's going to want to get out. And I don't think it'll ever come to that. I think he has tremendous character, and I think that he sees it as a challenge to bring a Stanley Cup to Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he can do it. I know it's probably more difficult than it's ever been in the league. Now you look at the parity and teams, jump up and fall off from year to year, and it's really difficult to maintain success in the league now. But I think the team will be fine if they just keep up that high standard of, these are the things that are expected of you as a member of this organization. And if you don't, meet those standards, then you are going to be held accountable, whether you're fired or traded or just, called out publicly or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be okay to just be a lousy team, just to be a team in the NHL. And so as long as that doesn't set back in, and I feel like it's lurking in the background, sort of lurking in the weeds there with the old boys club still hanging around. As long as that doesn't come back, I think everything will be fine. And, I've never actually said this in my videos, but the person who's really to blame for all of that is Daryl Cates. I mean, he's at the top and he lets all this stuff go on.
Yeah.
And there's no getting rid of him. So I just hope that, you have enough good people in your organization that it keeps all that stuff at bay. So,
yeah, I've always wondered what his level of, like just how involved he is in decisions. I mean, certainly, in Carolina, they've got a new owner, Dundon or Dundas. I always get it wrong. He's obviously going to be very involved. But Cates has seemed to, other than, having him and his whole family up at the draft, you don't hear a lot, you don't hear a lot about him and the moves that he may or may not have made. But he clearly, is also a fan of the old Oilers. And, of course, he's been around Edmonton long enough to know those guys. And the Red Wine Summit, as you referred to, is probably very much a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, the last thing, really, it's the off season, so there's not a ton to talk about. But do you have anybody sort of in the prospects? Do you follow the prospects at all coming up? Is there anybody you kind of see at number 10, or what do you think the Oilers do with that number 10 pick going into the draft?
I certainly hope they keep it and draft someone. I really don't want them to move that pick. There's a lot of good defensemen. I think there's 6 defensemen ranked in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken. Depends on whose top 10 you're going with, whose draft rankings. But I mean, I like a lot of those defensemen. I mean, Dahlin's not going to be there. Boqvist's not going to be there. I don't think Hughes will be. But depending on teams' needs, I would love it if the Oilers got Bouchard or Dobson, either of those two guys. And I know there's this fascination, this infatuation with right shot D man, power play point man, and I understand, I do understand it, but it's pretty much the rarest commodity in the league, and so there's only so many of them out there. So I don't think the Oilers should, sell the farm to try to bring one of these guys in. I would rather them do it organically. So, they've done a very good job of developing Ethan Bear so far. I liked what I saw from him this year. He still needs work, but I liked what I saw. And some of the other defensemen that Chiarelli has drafted, I really like what I see there too. And so, and actually, if you look at their defense as a whole, compared to when he came in, it is much, much better. But having said that, like I said earlier, I think they still finished dead last in point production from their blue line this year. Yeah. But I would continue to stock the cupboards there. If they can get Bouchard or Dobson and just add another defenseman to that stable of prospects, that'd be great. Because the thing is, then you're dealing from a position of strength. Like the Oilers built their team completely wrong before, in that it's like, let's get all these wingers and then go from there. And it's like, well, no, that should not be how you build your team. You should be building from center and D and goal. Every Stanley Cup winning team that I even recall was strong at those positions. And so I think, yeah, if they continue to collect some really good defensemen, then you're the team that can trade a defenseman and bring in a winger. You know, I mean, they were in the opposite side of that when they had to move Hall out to address a major weakness on their defense. You don't want to be the team that has to do that. So again, I hear all these rumors floating around that, you know, about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and I'm like, holy smokes, like we've already given up so much to try to upgrade the D. Why are we continue? Like, I mean, as you said earlier with the Reinhart trade, like that one blew up in their face so bad. I know people have mixed feelings on Taylor Hall for Adam Larsson, but they've already given up a lot of talent to try to address the D. I think it's better. Look, we have this pick. And that's the other thing. It's actually something to show from this terrible season. We got a good draft pick. Good. Why would we trade it away? Like, it's the one saving grace from this year. So I wouldn't look at it as an asset in a trade. Chiarelli should just, you know, take one of these good defensemen that's there and let him slowly develop. And then, you know, in a few years, if they can't afford Nurse, or, you know, they're moving out Russell or Secker, or contracts are up, then you can bring him along at the right time. So I don't have the panic, I guess, that a lot of fans seem to have, is it's like, we need to fix this and we need to go out and get like one of the best defensemen in the league. And I don't really subscribe to that mentality. I think just because last year went badly, keep trying to do things the right way. Don't make a panic move, because those rarely work out. So yeah, like I said, I would draft. There's a lot of good defensemen there. And if they're all gone, then, I mean, Ty Smith is there as well. He's a solid guy. I know he's more of a stay-at-home type, but you can take it forward too. That's fine. But don't just throw the pick away to try to have a Band-Aid solution and make sure that you get into the playoffs this year. I'd count on things going a little bit better and the team coming into camp with a chip on their shoulder and turning things around. So I'd totally keep the pick. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm totally 100% with you. I've got a ton of, as I think a lot of hockey fans do, respect for Friedman. And he asked who the guy that sat in for Stauffer when he was away, Brendan Ulrich. He asked him, you know, he said, well, you know, you got to ask yourself when you're thinking about these trades, whether it's for Ekman-Larsson or whatever, you know, are you legitimately a better team with that guy on your team, and considering what you're giving up, right? And so what do you have to give up for, you know, a guy like Ekman-Larsson? It's considerable. And are you willing to, you know, give up on, you know, let's even talk like Klefbom. I mean, a lot of people seem to have written Klefbom off after one bad year. He's still a young defenseman. Are you willing to take that chance and see him on another team? You know, and Oilers fans are not forgiving that way. So why would you do that when, you know, you have you know, a reasonably talented D today, who some of them you hope come back and have the seasons that they had prior? You know, was Klefbom's season an off season, or was it, you know, or is that the way he's going to end up? So yeah, no, I would definitely keep that 10th pick. And the other thing when I think about that, probably one of the big things I think about, and I've had a chance to interview people around the league on the podcast. I interviewed a guy with one of the Lightning blogs and podcasts, and interviewed a guy. He's actually a guy that lives in Edmonton, is a huge Capitals fan. And, you know, when I think about those two teams, they're draft and develop teams. And the teams that are having success are these teams that are not making the big splashy trades, right? They're finding players and developing them. And I wasn't sure how I felt about putting Woodcroft down on the AHL side. But the other thing that most of these teams, they try to get their minor league team to play, the same system as they play in the big league. And, my understanding is Woodcroft and McClellan are best friends, really. Right. And, who better to have down there, preaching all of the things that McClellan has to, is preaching up on the big team. And so as you start to develop these players and you're developing them in an Oilers system from a guy that was involved in that system and knows what McClellan likes, I think you're going to see, some success even from the players that we call up. And that might be, a 10th overall pick. I think that, the, good or bad, good for Noah Dobson, maybe bad for the Oilers, because Dobson's been, he's been all over the chart in terms of what people think of him. He has had a terrific Memorial Cup. In fact, he had a terrific playoff. He's pretty much taken that Bathurst team to the Memorial Cup final, both in the queue and then in the tournament itself. So my guess is he's going to go early. Bouchard may go back, and just because of Dobson going upwards. Bouchard might go down. In fact, Bouchard is the one that I usually have Sean from the Oil Night on, and he lives in London, and he's watched Bouchard. He's Sean's a big Oil Knights fan, but he's not as I think hot on Bouchard as a lot of people seem to be. And Sean's got a keen eye for prospects, although I think he'd take him in the top 20. I don't think he'd take him as high as a lot of people take him. So he might fall back. Wherever you pick this year in the top, say 15, you're going to get a guy that is pretty good, and a guy that has a good, solid chance, if developed properly, of being a really good player in your system. And if we want to see more than one playoff outing, we got to start taking these picks and developing them in the system, and not, I get why we, played guys soon, right? Like why we put Nuge in right away. I get that. I mean, Oilers fans wanted something right away, and we thought that might be the way to do it. But I think we finally have an opportunity to, we've got McDavid in the system now for another 8 years. We've got Draisaitl, who, the one thing I don't get is why people are not praising this guy's year. He had an off year, and he still hit 70 points with next to nothing on the power play. I think 5-on-5, he ended up near the top 10 in point production, 5 versus 5, right?
Oh, from as centerman, he was 20th in points. He was 71st in power play points among centermen in the NHL.
It's unreal, right? And that's a bad year,
it is.
Or so they said, right?
Exactly. Like, and I think that trade talk, they were talking about it on Hockey Night in Canada one night, and I was like, "Are you guys even watching the Oilers play? Like, what are you guys talking about?" I mean, he had the concussion and the new contract. I know that weighed on him, and 70 point, like that's nothing to scoff at. In my opinion, he is a number one center on at least 10 teams.
Totally
in the NHL.
agree.
So you don't trade a guy like that away. And how old is he? He's 22. He just turned 22, I think. I mean, he's a stud. If he's healthy next year, I don't see any reason why he doesn't have 80 points.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and we finally, as was seen, and was one of the things that I kept getting on McClellan about. We finally started seeing him, on a second line, right? Once that happened, right? I mean, you've got a guy that you're right, or that I feel is an 80-point guy next year on the second line. That's a 1-2 punch that is unbelievable. And I'm not even that down on Strome. I think he needs a little bit more consistency. He's a very streaky player. The analytics would back that up. Watching him backs that up. If they don't, if they don't overplay Lucic at the beginning of the season, I think, we could see him even bounce back if he's, played a little bit further down and has a chance to get some confidence behind him again. There's just a ton of things that could go right for this team that went wrong this past year. I liked what you had to say, right? If you were to replay this past season 100 times, it might be 10% of those times that we don't make the playoffs. I mean, this all started on what do you do with the 10th pick? Absolutely keep it. Don't start to make crazy trades and take a chance at developing players for a change. And I think we've got a bright future ahead of us. Not unlike the Crosby Malkin years, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some comparisons there for sure. And I understand why there are fans who they're just fed up and they're like, fix it now and let's just be competitive now. Like, I don't care about 3 years from now or 5 years from now. But I think the thing people need to remember is just how bad the drafting and developing was for like 4 or 5 years. And that just crippled the team. Like, you look at the late rounds in 2000 and 2011 and 2012, and like, there's nothing there. There's nothing to show from being bad those years. And I give Chiarelli and Keith Gretzky credit. Like, they've done a solid job in the last few drafts here, especially considering they didn't have a lot of picks. Like, the one guy, like, I've seen him play a handful of times, is Stuart Skinner. And when they made that pick, I remember I tweeted it and I was like, this is a really good late pick. Like, they might have hit a home run here. And I mean, his stock soared this year. So, and they didn't have that for so long, where it's like, you pick a guy, in the third or fourth round and he turns into something. So I think people need to remember that is that they actually have guys now who can make those picks and, find some players. And like you said, those teams that are successful consistently, they draft and develop well. They have that model in place. So the others need to continue to do that. Yeah,
and I feel like if we have a decent season, which means Chiarelli will be back, then that's something we will get to. And Chiarelli might be you might be doing Chiarelli imitations for a long time.
If my wife will let me buzz my hair again, yeah. And grow that silly mustache. Yeah.
So you got fully involved for that.
Oh yeah. Do you know what I actually did is I did the cul-de-sac. I buzzed my hair so I had it like his. And then I put a hat on. I came to my work where we have a green screen. I filmed it. And then as soon as I filmed it, I went into the bathroom and shaved the rest of my hair off because I didn't even want to risk that like someone would ask me to like take my hat off for some unknown reason throughout the day. But yeah, like I totally got into I like studied his mannerisms and he says terrific a lot. And so I was listening to his language and everything. And then I did put a lot into it. And I thought I did a pretty good job. Like it was pretty close to passing for him if somebody wasn't looking too closely.
And for those of you that I always like to say that are still listening at this point, you have to go to the video and watch. It's right on your homepage. Right, it's pinned to the top, I would assume, or however that's done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right on my
Yeah, and
main
it's
YouTube channel. Yeah.
just a short ways in. And when I first saw it, when you first cut away to it, I was sold, for a half second. So yeah, you did a great job. You're a little leaner than he is, so I guess you could stock up on the pounds and get there if you really you ever do it again. Of course, as it sounds like your wife's not going to let you. So
yeah, and she doesn't let me do the beard really anymore. Like when I did the Cassian
I haven't
chops
seen that one.
in the playoffs. Well, I took a picture of it and put it on Facebook, I think. But I shaved them into the big chops, right?
Yeah,
the big sideburns, and it's a good thing they got knocked out like 2 days later because she was not having it.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you go all the way. For those of us that enjoy watching your videos, I think this is probably a good time to say goodnight and thank you for being on the show. I certainly, I'm yet to have a guest that I wouldn't want back, and I would like to have you back if you're game for it. I won't ask you to write any articles. You and I both hate writing articles. But definitely would like to have you back. When do you expect to be doing the next YouTube?
Well, depending, I guess, what happens in the draft and free agency. Like I said earlier, I try to do them whenever I can, and you know this because you have a family. It's harder and harder to find the time, and the thing is, I want them to be good. Right. I want there to be quality there, not just quantity. So if I'm going to do one, I want to make sure it's good. But I think I got a little bit extra time this summer. So hopefully I'll put something together maybe right after the draft or right after free agency.
I have to actually, I've totally forgot to ask this. Mike Comrie 89.
I made that like, I don't even know when, years ago, and you can't change it. Like you can't change your YouTube URL. So it's just stood for all this time. And then the thing is, like, once I actually had a bit of a following on YouTube, I was like, well, I can't create a whole new channel now and tell everybody to go over here when they're already coming here. So I didn't think a lot of people saw that, but apparently they do. So I was a big fan of his when he came in. I saw him when he played in Kootenay, and then the Oilers signed him and brought him in, but it didn't. So.
But there's probably a ton of new Oilers fans too that are wondering, what, why isn't your name Ryan?
There's no fixing that.
Right
That'll
on.
be there.
All right. So, thanks again. And I'll just do another shout out, and then I'll give you a chance to say some last thoughts. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed yet to Ryan's YouTube channel, go there right now. You can find him at youtube.com. I think you can get there just by going /Mike Comrie, and that's COMRIE 89. Or do you need to have the user first? Do you know?
You know what? I'm not sure. You can just go to YouTube, and I'm pretty sure that if you type in Oilers blog, it'll be one of the top ones.
Perfect. And so, and for those of you listening, go there and subscribe. Really enjoy. You can enjoy his videos. Enjoy watching some of the antics of his family get on there, and I've enjoyed your analysis. And so, thanks, and keep doing them. And thanks for being on the show. Any last thoughts before we say goodnight?
I guess we never got into some hot topics. Like, I know people still argue about Taylor Hall, but they do. I guess the reason, I kind of want to clarify something that I haven't really talked about is the reason I didn't really blog much this last year. There's a lot of reasons, but the main reasons were, like I said, my family life. So I didn't have the time to pay attention as much as I'd like. And then also because I wasn't able to watch as much as I would have preferred, I didn't think it was fair to share my opinions when I didn't really have the full picture. And then the other thing, and this is why I'm mentioning this, is it wasn't fun. I mean, last year, there was just a real negative atmosphere around the team. Twitter was really toxic. And I didn't enjoy talking about the Oilers last year. And I guess the reason I say this is I think as Oilers fans, we should all make an effort this year to be positive and to be kind to each other and to engage in healthy debate and healthy conversation about the team. And I think we'll all enjoy the season a lot more if that's what happens. So I guess that's my mini rant to end things. So thank you very much for having me on. I had a lot of fun, and I like what you're doing here. And yeah, thanks a lot. This was great.
Excellent. I really had fun having you on the show, and we'll get you back. Thanks, Ryan.
Oilers Live.